Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Anastasia Stoyanova. Thank you if you're listening to this or if you're watching the video version on YouTube. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. And in today's episode, I'm going to continue talking about immigration to Canada, and I'll focus on two aspects: is finding your first job in Canada, in Toronto. In my case, I'll share my experience. Also, finding your first apartment to live. So, because these two things are crucial, I would say they are essential. And also, I'll touch upon the lessons that I learned from immigration. This is just based on this episode and the previous episode. And if you haven't listened or if you haven't watched the previous episodes to get to know more about me, you could do that. So, I'm an English teacher living and working in Toronto, and it's been my 4th year in Toronto. Hey! Life's great, not easy, but great. So I want to talk about the housing nightmare in Toronto. These days, it's very hard to find a decent apartment or condo. And I think the problem with that is that when you come to a new country, they expect you to bring your money with you, your capital. Why is that? Because in most cases, you gotta prepay your apartment lease, right? It's not legal, but it's a widespread practice, especially in Toronto, because landlords, they have so many options, right? They have so many people wanting, especially if this place is worth it and it's good, it has a good location, good security, concierge, or some amenities. You're gonna be fighting for this apartment, right? So don't expect the things to be easy, but just be prepared is the best strategy. So you should bring at least half a year of the rent up front. So don't expect for miracles to happen, please. I've seen so many times that people just come here and then they end up homeless or end up just in a host family living for a long time, but it's not available for everyone. Remember that. I remember that for some time it was available for the Ukrainian nationals as far as I remember. But basically, you gotta compete for housing in major cities of the country like Toronto. They might so your real estate agent might ask you to prepare, let's say, $12,000, or $15,000 just to pay up front, pay the landlord up front. Though it's not legal, but that's what just happens: is that you write that, you're willing to do that, for example, and that's how you show your landlord that you are trustworthy and that though you are new to this country, but you are able to pay and you're able to prepay. So the reason for that is that the rights of tenants are well protected in Canada. So if you're in trouble and if you cannot pay the rent, so you sign the contract, the lease agreement, you're still protected by law, so they cannot evict you that easily. However, we don't want to get into negativity, right? We just want to be positive and just be prepared, get the money, and in case that's not something you can do, you can just always look for cheaper options. You can look for cheaper apartments. They might be not, in the best area or not in the safest neighborhood, but that could be at least some kind of start. In our case, when we just arrived in Canada, before getting a permanent apartment, we were living in a temporary one. It was a hotel booked through Airbnb, and then the second place was also a temporary apartment. And the area of the city was not good, as it turned out to be, though online there were no negative reviews, but there is always more that you should search about. That's why I always recommend looking up the reviews on Reddit, for example, about this or that neighborhood. If you don't use Reddit, that's your loss, because you should. On Reddit, we have an amazing community, Ask Toronto. So if you are planning on moving to Toronto, so you can read everything about the city. I wish I had known that before when we were just arriving, and we ended up in a bad neighborhood. The good thing that it was only temporary apartment, but I was scared. I was super scared. We were living without any protection or, concierge or any of that kind of thing. It was an old house, and we were living by the park. And in that park, in the summer, we arrived in the summer. It was like late spring and summer. There were so many drug addicts They were building tents, they were shouting and screaming, they were doing drugs, and it was not safe. So my first impression of Toronto, you can imagine what it was. It was not good. The real conditions in that temporary apartment is that we had rats, and I remember I was sleeping at night, and I remember that scratch in the wall, and it just sent shivers down my spine so much. I still, it's been years, but I still remember this as if it was yesterday. The unsanitary conditions, because it was only a temporary apartment, so they were cockroaches, and the cockroaches in Canada are huge. I'm not sure if they're huge in every city, but in Toronto they're huge, and they're black, and they're like hairy. I don't know. One night I was just sleeping, and what happened is that I got thirsty, wanted to get up and just pour some water and take a sip. And I turned on the light, and I remember this huge cockroach was just running towards me, and it was almost like a cockamouse, if you ever watched How I Met Your Mother, maybe you remember that episode that they were joking that the cockroach was so big that it was like a cockroach and a mouse, as if they were having a sexual intercourse, and then the cockamouse appeared. Anyway, it was just a small joke. What I'm saying is that the cockroach was huge and black, and I screamed, and I remember my husband trying to kind of calm me down and just saying that it's all temporary. But I think the last straw was, I would say, the final point was something that made me realize that we need to escalate this and try to find the apartment as fast as possible. Was that one time I remember I needed to go to work really, really early, like 6:30, to be up, to go to take the subway and be at the language school where I was teaching. And I remember that party with so many people. They were I'm not even sure. I don't think they were partially addicts, partially just normal people, but they just set up this party in the park, and they were drinking, and they were also consuming weed, and it was not pleasant. It was not a good experience, and it was right in front of our door, in front of our windows, right there. And at that moment I thought, oh my God, what am I doing in this Toronto? I hate it. And I really hated the Toronto back then, because I think your apartment or your condo or your house, these are the most important things, right? Your surrounding, your environment, where you are, defines you a lot. So that's why I remembered that I had that friend. We were doing the qualification, the teachers training together. So I called her and I asked her if she had known anyone who is in real estate, and she said, oh, yeah. So I'm forever grateful, because she helped. She found a good real estate agent, and that's one of the tips. I highly recommend you guys to work through the real estate agent, because the tenant does not pay for the services. Essentially, the landlord pays, and it's a little bit different. Maybe in your home country it might be different. I know that in Ukraine it's a bit different, because everyone pays for the real estate agent's services, right? We all pay. The tenant, the landlord, everyone pays, right? And in most countries, I think tenants pay, but not in Canada. It depends. You got to check. So in our case, that was good, because it was not like we were not buying, right? We were not selling. We were just looking for a place to live as tenants, to lease, to rent the place. So my friend recommended the real estate agent, and then she was able to find the condo for us, but it was a stiff competition. We were bidding against other people. And sometimes, we wanted to go and take a look at the place. And by the time we would go and we would look at the place, the real estate agent would get the call, and they were saying that, sorry, it's already leased. So that's why we had to go blind. What I mean is that at some point we just gave up and we said, whatever, we are not even going to take a look at the place. it's like, so be it, we just offer, we make make a bid. So basically place our application, because there's the rental application that you fill in, and in the system, the landlord will get it through your real estate agent. So at some point, we even gave up and we never looked at the apartment, right? We had to go blind, and we had to just sign the lease blindly if we were to be chosen, because the landlords could choose, but that was back in 2022. Now things are changing because, some people claim that the demand is not as high in Toronto, but I don't believe in that. I think the apartments and the condos in Toronto are always going to be in demand, and people will always want to live and to be in Toronto. So there is no way that you gonna get the apartment easily without rental history. So what you need is, if you don't have the money, you can get the guarantor, or the person who can sign the documents and claim that they know you. Usually it should be a Canadian citizen who knows you, right? Maybe if you come here and you already have sisters, brothers, or someone. That was not the case for us, because we were all by ourselves. So, but I know that that's the case for some people, that they just ask someone to kind of sign and claim that in case you don't pay, that guarantor person will pay for you. And landlords accept that as their peace of mind. So, but yeah, I think that there is a kind of discrimination, right? Because it's not direct, it's not explicit, but there is this kind of discrimination going on. So you gotta have references, for your rental application, so like your previous landlords, and if you don't have that, then you gotta pay up front. So that's just the reality of the market. But I'm forever grateful to my friend. She is now living permanently in France, not in Toronto anymore, not in Canada, not in Ontario, as you see. But I'm grateful that she helped with the real estate agent, and we were able to get that apartment. So I think the stars aligned, So forever grateful. And then the job search, that's the next part of today's audio or video if you're watching on YouTube. So the job search has the same kind of obstacles. So you gotta be prepared, because your prospective employer will need to contact your previous employer. So you gotta prepare what they call references. The same way for your rental application, you're obliged to prepare references. So some people who you were working with, or in my case, one of my references was the person who trained me in London, the UK, during my teaching qualification experience. So what they do is that your prospective employer reaches out to the references, and then they ask for some kind of confirmation that, yes, I know this person, and this person was this and that. And they are required to confirm your experience, your qualities, your skills, and things like that. I want to point out that digital presence is crucial when it comes to job search, especially your first job. Your LinkedIn should be perfect. All the fields should be filled out. Like you gotta show your experience, your education, everything. And also creating an Indeed account, because that's how I found my first job in Toronto, in Canada, as an ESL instructor. That's an English teacher for foreigners, for immigrants. I created my Indeed account. I filled in the information. I was trying to get a job. It was not easy. If you listened to my previous episode when I was sharing with you and I was pouring my heart and soul, finding a job as an English teacher was not easy, and the pay was not something that I was happy about, but it is what it is, right? We all struggle, we all come on top if we are lucky. So for me, it's work in progress. You gotta also, the last but not least, adapt your resume up to Canadian standards, meaning you should not have a photograph, for example, right? That's not something they do here in Canada. I highly recommend reaching out to people who have been through that and who can help you to build this resume. Look at what they are called, special score for the resume. I forgot what it was called because it's been a while for me. ATS score. So you could take a look. Just type in, the Canadian style resumes. You could also basically build your resume based on the LinkedIn. So I would suggest just typing and doing the research of the people who have who are in the same field and who have very similar experience. And when you type in your LinkedIn also lets you download the person's experience, work experience, and education in the format of the resume. That's what I was trying to say. It's like you can download in the PDF format right straight from someone's LinkedIn, and just that's the basic start for you. That's where you go from there. You download those resumes and you build your own resume based on how other people build their resume. So that's an important thing. And for this one, my husband was really helping me with the technical part of the resume. He was like double checking, reading through my experience. Of course, getting professional certifications, it might take time, but even maybe if you're not in Canada yet and you want to come to Canada, you might consider getting some professional certifications in your field before you come to Canada also. So it depends on what kind of field you're in. Sometimes you cannot get those certifications unless you're here in Canada. Like in my case, Tassel, Ontario, I was going through training here and, getting all the local certificates. So that might take time, but there's just something to consider. Maybe just prepare for that beforehand. And so that's like that. I hope that my tips help you. Right now, I want to kind of do a little bit of summary, and I want to talk about, for me, that's the most interesting part. So far, I have been in Canada for 4 years, and what are some life lessons that I learned from my experience? So first of all, I learned financial literacy and how to manage my money, how to save money, and also I learned that reality does not always meet our expectations, right? Like reality is not what we expect sometimes. So do not romanticize Canada or do not see it as the perfect place, because there is no such thing, right? Just kind of be happy about small things, yeah? So, because there are some important lessons when it comes to human nature, because I think there is always some kind of vulnerability when you immigrate, because immigration is all about the loss, especially at the initial stage. It's all about the loss, because you lose the circle of friends you had, you lose this touch with the reality, right? You kind of, sometimes it's just you can go down the spiral and you can all stuck in this negativity, but there are many psychological lessons to learn, like the lesson of humility, meaning that you should lower your bar, lower your expectation. And it's not a weakness, it's wisdom. And ask for help. I know it takes courage, but for me, at some point, I'd been already in Canada for 2 years when I got depressed. I became depressed, and I was at the point where I couldn't leave my house, I couldn't get out, I couldn't even wake up to go to work, and I was trying to seek help, to seek therapy, to seek medical help, start taking certain medication if it helps you. So make sure you seek help, you ask for help, because this ability to adapt and to adapt your plans and sometimes to give up the things that let's say you started pursuing something, like it was in my case in Canada, but then you give up on certain things. You kind of learn how to be flexible mentally, right? So that's important. And consider that every system has written and unwritten rules. Like I said, remember that corruption is not always that explicit. Sometimes you got to understand that certain people are in favor of certain people just because they are like that. It doesn't mean that it's a bad system. I think it's just human nature, right? So like I said, the reality is not always perfect. And Also, I learned that in the modern world, we gotta be able to put ourselves out there, because online reputation is like real reputation. You gotta have your social media in perfect condition. You gotta have your LinkedIn. Everything should be in a perfect state and be ready to go. Because that's just Canada, right? There are so many good people here, and we compete with each other, right? And to win this kind of competition for your job, competition for your apartment, your first apartment, you gotta have this digital literacy, learn how to build your resume, learn how to build your socials. You should you should learn this communication skill and making new friends and new connections, and that takes time and money. And you just have to accept that you gotta be strong. You gotta have this inner strength in yourself, because for me, the system can break you. And if you overwork, as I was explaining to you guys before in the previous episode, that I was overworked, I was underpaid, I was undervalued, by some people, by my friends at that time. I was, rejected also when it comes to so many things in my life, and even work, everything. You lose things, it's all about loss, honestly. And I think only now I really begin to gain something from this immigration rather than lose something. And it took me like 4 years, you see. So lots of lessons learned. And you just, I think the important point here is that also your values are going to change, your opinions are going to change. Nothing is set in stone anymore once you immigrated. Once you come to Canada, or I assume to any other country, right? You gotta redefine the understanding of success, redefine the understanding of who you are, redefine the understanding of the values that you uphold, the principles that you follow. So just remember maybe that, I wish somebody had told me that it's just, all you need is just patience, and just sometimes just take a deep breath. And just remember that it's just like an investment. So an investment into your future requires some sacrifices in the present time, in the present moment. So I think these lessons they might seem universal, that might seem a bit corny, but I think they are applicable not only to immigration, but to any major life changes, because immigration is a big change. And I hope that you're ready for this crisis management. And maybe if you're lucky, then your spouse or your friends are going to be by your side. So remember that sometimes it's a luxury to have a good partner, to have a good friend. It's a luxury because it might get lonely, even in the city like Toronto, which I'll be talking about in the next few episodes. The importance of building that friendships and connections and just life in Toronto. But anyway, I've always been an open person, and I'm ready to make new connections. And I hope that you learned something today. And if you have any thoughts about this is again just my life story, my experience. Feel free to share, to ask me, reach out through any social media. Just type Anastasia Stoyanova. You can always reach out and add me as a friend. Comment here on the YouTube channel. I'll be glad to respond to you guys, and I hope you're enjoying your day. And see you in the next episode. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.